everyone, I'm Alexis Cobo, and I'm going to talk about debugging from a practitioner's perspective. I'm a first-year doctoral student at the University of Florida, but for the last 9 years, I've been teaching computer science in a college preparatory school, pre-K to 12, and I wanted to give a little context for this. In pre-K to first grade, students have direct computer science instruction 30 minutes a day, 2 times a week, and in second through fifth grade, students receive computer science instruction for 40 minutes a session, 1 time weekly, but receive additional project-based learning units in core content as push-in. And then as they get older, in 6th through 8th grade, they have a mandatory computer science wheel course for 9 weeks. And then in 9th through 12th grade, they take AP courses and post-AP courses. So you have a context for where this curriculum was developed from. And so the content that is taught in pre-K to 5 is aligned to the CSTA and K-12 framework standards. We do a mix of unplugged activities. Our 2 main programming language are Scratch Junior in pre-K through 2, and then we transition in second to Scratch all the way through 5th. We do a mix of robotics and of course digital fluency skills. But as you can see here from the little snippet I put in from our curriculum map, computational thinking is at the root of all of our computer science lessons. So what I wanted to do was share how, as a practitioner, I built a community of debugging culture throughout all the activities. So starting with Unplugged, I want students to think about when they see a challenge or an activity, everything to them kind of looks like a puzzle, but then they have to think about how they'll break it apart. And so as they get older, they have to learn how to make abstractions through social problem solving. And so I use things like SOMAs or other types of unplugged problem solving activities, and I encourage them to work together in groups to problem solve or debug. And going back to some of the foundations of computational thinking, as they're moving through and scaffolding to build their schema, they have to decompose and develop pattern recognition. So in this first picture, as they're transitioning from Scratch Junior to Scratch, keeping in mind this is the older Scratch blocks, they had to section them off and put them from what the original palettes were, from looks to control and moving forward. And then the same thing as they're starting to write their code and pseudocoding, same types of manipulatives. So they're already developing that process before they go plugged. Then as we move into plugged activities, I like to root things in the habits of mind. And one of the important habits of mind when students are working together is listening to others with empathy and understanding. And as you can see from these 2 pictures, the students are encouraged to work together collaboratively and build from each other as a way to debug. And then as we move on, and these students here are also doing the same as they are working on projects, I also encourage them to develop purposeful planning and sketching to pseudocode as a way to help them think through their process, which is what you see here that this student is doing. This was his particular process in every project, not something that I necessarily asked them to do, but that's his process that he came up with. And then I wanted to make sure that it was clear that debugging doesn't only happen when we're doing things that are directly coding related, but also through making and creating a space for playful engagement through testing and failing and iterating. And the ultimate test is in this habit of mind of learning continuously, where the student takes on the role of the teacher and explains the CT or CS concept to their classmates. So in this picture, you're seeing 2 students who created this presentation to teach the concepts back to the rest of the class and becoming the experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Let me get to the question in the Q&A. All right, so Jody, do you want to ask your question first around the language? I guess you had a couple of questions.
Sure. That was mind-blowing, actually. Thank you for that. I think a bunch of us are really excited about those 3D blocks, and I see a marketing possibility here. But I wanted to ask, with the really young learners, when and how and if and do you introduce the words abstraction and problem decomposition?
Pre-K.
Really? So you go right for the words right away?
Yeah, I think it's really important to give students the credit that they can learn what it means in context by doing things like that Jenga lesson. I do that, like kids all know these are familiar games to them, but they don't realize that computational thinking is behind it. So as we're playing the game and I'm like taking the pieces apart with them and doing some of the routines with it, I'm teaching them what those words mean as we're playing the game. Or even some other games that I play with them. I've done it with Simon Says with them. I've done it with string and rope with them. When we make friendship bracelets. But I think it's really important to give kids the credit that they can learn these words. And also the context of this setting, it's a college preparatory school, it's an advanced curriculum. So the expectation is that these students are, needing to be challenged. And so this is a good opportunity to scaffold that for them and help build their schema.
Great. All right, other questions for Alexis. Where did you get the blocks? Did you 3D print them or did you purchase them?
No, so a colleague of mine, we 3D printed them. And then we found a bunch of those puzzles from online and printed them. He used them in middle school in a totally different way, but I used them strictly as a debugging activity before doing some other lessons. I used those in 4th and 5th grade. Some of the kids had a really hard time, and then a couple of kids wanted to like race each other who could finish their varying levels, who could finish them the fastest.
Great. Karen, did you want to ask your question?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's so lovely to see so many debugging friends. Alexis, thank you for the presentation. It's so beautiful. And I've been a longtime fan of you and in your work. So I'm so excited to see you here in this new community. I loved how it culminated in this like teaching back, this like, I've learned something I'm going to share with you. What does it look like in sort of the more nascent steps? Like what are sort of major milestones in the development of a community committed to debugging, which I loved your debugging culture.
Yeah. So a lot of it comes naturally, and I think the relationship and the rapport that I build with the students, and I don't know if there's like a process or a place in which now I turn it over to the students and I say, okay, now it's your turn, but it happens organically because of the tone that is set up front. Like I'm always inviting them to take the stage and I sort of take the back seat. That's my like, constructionist, nature. But there are certain tasks where we do code alongs and then I step back and I ask them, okay, can you now explain this for me and break this down and explain back to me what I just said so that I have like a check-in and know. I also should note that I give no grades. So they're not like actually held accountable for anything for what I do, but they have no idea about that. So they sort of just, come along with me unknowingly that they're not really held accountable for any of this work, but they still give 110%. I hope that answers your question.
Lovely. I look forward to seeing how the work develops.
Wonderful. Alexis, great job.